The film opens with a group of 3 people posing for a photograph. As they prepare for the picture, the photographer notices an unusual object beneath Chris's feet. Alicia mistakes the photographer's uncertainty for incompetence, but he frantically warns her not to move. Upon closer inspection, Daniel discovers that Chris is standing on a landmine. The group is stunned and terrified as they realize the danger they are in. Alicia is overwhelmed and in tears, unable to comprehend the situation. The photographer is scared and flees down the hill. Chris is anxious and attempts to remain still. Daniel escorts Alicia up the hill where he can get a signal and makes an attempt to call for assistance. Oddly enough, he heads back towards Chris with an enraged expression on his face. This is when he discloses to Chris that he was the one who set up the mine. Chris is perplexed, and when Alicia comes down to meet them, Daniel confesses that he is aware of their affair. Chris and Daniel were best friends, while Alicia is said to marry Daniel. He cannot believe that they betrayed him and decided to take revenge by devising a plan to bring them both to the location. Alicia pleads with Daniel for his forgiveness, but he refuses to listen to her and heads towards a nearby tree to grab a spade. He reveals that his intention was to bury Chris in the forest after killing him. Chris questions the authenticity of the mine, as Daniel was standing close to him before and didn't seem to show any signs of concern. However, Daniel removes the safety cable, proving that the mine is real. Chris realizes that if he were to step off the mine at that moment, it would trigger an explosion that would kill him instantly. Alicia tries to reason Daniel and pleads for his forgiveness, but he refuses to listen and becomes furious. He expresses his disappointment and reveals his desire to spend the rest of his life with Alicia. In a fit of rage, Daniel throws the security cable and walks away. Later, Daniel meets the photographer he hired to plant the mine under Chris' feet. As Alicia stays behind, desperately trying to reattach the security cable, she finally fails. Frustrated, Alicia decides to dig a hole with a shovel. While this is happening, a hunter out with his dog happens upon the scene and approaches us to investigate. Alicia attempts to keep the dog from getting too close to Chris, but the hunter appears with his gun and demands that Chris turn around. When Chris explains that he cannot, the hunter fires a shot near his feet. After seeing the seriousness of the situation, the hunter goes to examine the mine more closely. The hunter throws a stone near Chris's feet to verify if they were telling the truth. Although Alicia and Chris get mad, they remain powerless. The hunter explains that he was only trying to make sure they were honest because he was unfamiliar with mines in the area. He inquires about their predicament and how they ended up in it, warning that he would not assist them if they were dishonest. Alicia recounts the events to the hunter, who agrees to assist them with a condition. Aware of their vulnerability, the hunter exploits the situation by demanding Alicia's clothes and forcefully grabbing her. Although Chris offers money, the hunter declines. To continue receiving help, Alicia has no choice but to comply with his request. However, while helping them, the hunter's radio in his bag suddenly goes off. Upon hearing the radio, Alicia approaches the hunter and requests to borrow it for help. However, the hunter manipulates her emotions again by imposing a condition. She must crawl to retrieve the scarf she had given him, which he tosses on the ground. Alicia becomes upset but complies with his demand and picks up the scarf. The hunter remains unsatisfied and orders her to crawl once more, this time retrieving the scarf with her mouth. The hunter eventually gives the radio to Alicia, but she is surprised to discover that the person on the other end doesn't speak English. Desperate for help, she turns to the hunter for assistance. He agrees to translate on the condition that Alicia starts removing her clothing. Initially refusing, Alicia realizes that complying with his demand may be her only way out of the situation. Thus, she begins to remove her clothes while the hunter translates for her. Unbeknownst to them, the hunter was deceitful and did not translate everything Alicia told him to. Eventually, Alicia is left with only her underwear and finishes requesting help. She instructs the hunter to leave, and he picks up his things and departs. However, his radio goes off again as he is leaving, and the audacious hunter returns to Alicia and proposes to reveal what was said. Once more, He insists that she must remove an item of clothing. Chris becomes infuriated and starts cursing at him. The hunter aimed his firearm at the person and cautioned him to be careful about what he said. Suddenly, Alicia spotted an opportunity and bolted. The hunter then let loose his canine, which gave chase down the hill. The guy took a rope and hastened after them. Meanwhile, Chris cautiously stooped and took hold of the safety cable, securing it to his waist before acquiring the hunter's weapon. The hunter subsequently came back with Alicia, carrying her firmly under his arm. He became more aggressive and warned Chris to drop the gun. Chris becomes immobile and incapable of taking any action. The hunter takes Alicia with him, disappearing behind the trees. Chris raises the gun, and as he's about to shoot, the hunter's dog rushes towards him, causing him to fall. The gun accidentally discharges, striking Alicia instead of the hunter. Miraculously, the landmine doesn't detonate when Chris hits the ground. When Chris regains consciousness, he discovers that the hunter has left with his dog, and Alicia is lying in a trench. He picks up her body and sobs uncontrollably. After some time had passed, Chris visits a house seeking help from a woman there. She grants him entry, and he begins to explain his situation when a man unexpectedly enters the house. As it turns out, the man is the hunter and he is stunned by what he sees. He quickly finds a way to get Chris to leave and warns him to stay away. Later, the hunter releases his dog and sends it after Chris. Later, the hunter hears his dog barking outside and hurries out to find the floor covered in blood. Chris is inside the house, nursing the injured dog and explaining that it was hit by a car. Upon the hunter's return, he immediately grabs his gun and aims it at Chris. However, Chris has already removed the bullets and cleverly shoots the hunter in the leg. He then instructs the daughter to tie up her mother, while the hunter pleads with him to stop. The hunter confesses that he was intoxicated and not in his right mind when he assaulted Alicia. Afterwards, Chris grabs a bottle of wine and takes a swig before making the mother and daughter drink as well. He spills some wine on the hunter's lap and forces the daughter to retrieve her scarf from the floor, mimicking the way the hunter had made Alicia do so. Chris then puts the scarf in the hunter's mouth and begins to manipulate the family. Despite the mother and daughter's fear for their lives, Chris is determined to seek revenge. He loads a bullet into the gun and informs the daughter that she must remove an article of clothing each time he fires the gun without a bullet. The hunter falls to the ground and pleads for mercy, but Chris is not satisfied yet. On the third shot, the gun unexpectedly fires and kills the daughter. Shocked by what has happened, Chris slumps to the floor and stares at the lifeless body in the corner. With his revenge finally achieved, the movie comes to an end. If you have made it this far into the video, we appreciate your dedication. To stay updated on more movie recaps, feel free to subscribe and join our movie community.